NFL Week 11 game previews. Eric joins me to discuss everything going on in the NFL and to preview all of your Week 11 NFL games, starting with the Steelers, with the Bengals at the Ravens on Thursday. I had it scrolled all the way down to the bottom, but I was thinking about that, Eric, because we actually get a really interesting Thursday night football game this week. The last couple of weeks, things have been a little bit off for the both of us, mainly because my schedule was off, but now we're able to kind of get back into our normal swing of things this week with our show on recording for my podcast Wednesday. You and I will talk on the winning ticket on Friday, and then Sunday morning we'll also preview all of these games with the latest up-to-date news and notes and everything there. But the Bengals, Eric, they're like a fascinating team to discuss because after their few recent wins and Joe Burrow starting to look more healthy, their defense also started to look a little bit better. Everyone kind of penciled them in as like, oh, they're going to be one of the top teams now. They're just going to go on a win streak, sort of like they did last year. And that was not the case at all last week. The Bengals ran into a really good Texans team. The Bengals scored a touchdown on their opening drive. Followed by that, they had 4 consecutive 3-and-outs over the second and third quarters before having to kneel down. So, I mean, they were just, I don't know if it was like a flat spot for them because they played well and they had this game on deck, but when we discussed it, you wouldn't have felt like they were going to take a Texans team lightly with Stroud looking so good and the Texans being kind of a buzzy team. But that sort of felt like what happened when you watch the game. The Bengals got 2 turnovers and couldn't do anything with those possessions. They didn't score at all with 2 gifts. Boyd dropped a wide open touchdown that could have put them ahead. The defense allowed 544 total yards, 7.4 yards per play. They got beat up on the ground and through the air too. It wasn't like, oh, they just couldn't stop a receiver. They were down to down. They got beat up. Singletary had 150 yards rushing. But even with all those struggles, they still had a chance to win the game. They got this big one here now, and Hendrickson for them on the defensive side hurt. That won't help. But in these divisional games, a lot of times they're very close, Eric. The Ravens, a couple really interesting stats before I throw it over to you on the Ravens this year. Through 10 games, they have trailed the 3rd least of any team in NFL history. That's pretty crazy to me that of all the teams in the entire NFL, how long they've been behind in their first 10 games, Baltimore is the 3rd team. They've barely been behind at all. What's really crazy is that if you took the top 5 teams, all 5 of the teams who've been behind the least amount of time in their first 10 games, the 2 teams in front of Baltimore were 10-0. The 2 teams behind Baltimore were 10-0. And they're 7-3. They find ways to lose. You know, all 3 of their losses this year, Eric, they could easily be 10-0. Very easily. Like they were games that they sort of lost. I know most teams aren't going to go perfect, but that is what happens with this team. Like they've had a bad stretch over the last couple of years. I think they're the only team in history to lose a game despite holding 4 separate leads of 14 points in a game. Just some really crazy stats. They were up big in this game and they spit it out. So 2 teams coming off of pretty bad losses for them. And now they've got a huge game on Thursday night, divisional game on a short week. Talk to us about how you see this one playing out.
I mean, it's so at openers, this was 3 and one shop had at 2.5. So I got the Ravens at 2.5. And obviously that number is long gone, you know, with the news of Hendricks and everything. But the thing that mainly stuck out to me, and, you know, we talked about it last week, was just kind of the splits that CJ Stroud has had on the road. And this Bengals defense just, for the life of them, could not get a stop. And it wasn't even against CJ. It was even just stopping the run.
Exactly. They were bad.
Who has been, I don't want to use the term putrid, but, you know, he really hasn't been anything this year.
Non-existent. Like, we haven't heard anything about him at all.
And he looked like a rock star.
How are they going
It
to
is
slow down
important.
this run game,
Correct.
right? Is that what kind
It
of was
is.
sticking in your head? Like, if they can't bring down Singletary, they're going to be able to stop Lamar and this powerful Ravens run game?
It is. That's the thing. But I mean, I've just got an alert that Staley, who's one of their best tackles, is not going to play the game. I mean, that's kind of like these
And
Thursday night games. People get out, and that hurts it.
And now
Lamar is a
that the
lot
difference between the number you got too, right? The 2.5 versus the 3.5 now, that's a major difference.
That's a huge difference. And I mean, Lamar Jackson, when he's laying 3.5 or more, he's only 39% against the number, which is a big difference. When he's 3 or less, the guy is a covering machine. And I really, at this current number, I wouldn't play it. I'm just worried about the Bengals defense. They weren't able to get stops at all against CJ Stroud and the weapons that he has rolling out. The Ravens do have more weapons, especially with Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews. Are you going to be able to stop Gus Edwards and Keegan Mitchell's
We've seen
back?
some like
I mean,
Odell and signs of life from Odell, right? In the last few weeks too, where it's like he doesn't need to be a number one guy, but when he can just make a flash and make a big play here and there, and there's a little bit less pressure on him, that's a good role for him.
Yep. And then you look at Zay Flowers, he's been electric. My thing is this at this current number, I wouldn't do it. I would look maybe for some prop plays. Maybe I would go there. Obviously, Burrow is a stud, but he is 0-5 straight up on the road in primetime games. So that's another trend you kind of have to remember. The current number I'd pass. If you can get this at 3 or lower on the live betting, I'd look to do that.
A couple things I wanted to flash up because I didn't get to mention them before. We're looking at the lines at DRF Sportsbook, and anyone that's in the state of Iowa, you can actually sign up for a DRF Sportsbook account right now, and you can play along. It's scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Our promo code, if you use FAST300, it'll give you all the way up to a $300 deposit match bonus. So if you want to play along as we get you all set up, if you're in Iowa, if you know anyone who is there, let them know. But in many other places, you can play parlayplay.io. Use the promo code NFL Betting Blitz. You can parlay props together. You can bet on a player's over or under on projected fantasy points each week. They have free NFL contests each and every week. They have games for all sports all the time. So if you're ever looking for some action, check out parlayplay.io. Erik, we talked about the Bengals and the team that defeated them in the Texans. Now we'll talk about them as they're a 5-point favorite hosting the Arizona Cardinals. This game is on Sunday. There was nothing fluky about that game, right? That it wasn't like, oh, the Texans got a pick six and it just flipped the game. They had 544 total yards. The Bengals had 380. They had 7.4 yards per play. They had 188 yards rushing, 350 yards passing. They won the time of possession. The only reason why the game was close, they had 3 turnovers and they had 7 penalties, and they were 3 of 5 in the red zone. So what's crazy, they beat a good team on the road as a touchdown underdog, and they still got stuff to clean up. Like, they can still be even better than they were, which is got to be a great positive for this coaching staff to be able to show this young team, look, you're playing well, you're playing the right way, but we can still do better. We can even do better than we did before. They're starting to get to the point now where this team is very buzzy. You know, everybody's really high on them now. Jacksonville hasn't looked great. Jacksonville just got crushed, and Houston beat Jacksonville earlier in the year. So now a lot of people are wanting to jump on this Texans team. But I want to give them a ton of credit. Stroud was awesome. He was graded quarterback 5 on the week. He had 8 pass plays of 20-plus yards. And he wasn't perfect. He's still young. He's still going to make mistakes. In fact, he had a bad little stretch. He fumbled twice in scoring range. He made a bad throw that was intercepted late in the game when they had a 10-point lead, and all they needed then was to pick up a first down. And they got the ball back, and then on the next drive, he had a bad underthrow, which meant Cincinnati got the ball back, and they tied the game. But you gave him another chance. He goes on a game-winning drive, sets up the Texans for the field goal. He ended up completing 11 of 19 passes for 10-plus air yards down the field. He's actually thrown for a league-high air yards on 10-plus passes, 10 plus yards, and the best EPA in the entire league. He's second in the league in passing yards. Do you know, Eric, who's number one?
Sam Howell.
I know it was one of those things where if you looked it up, you would have seen it, but I'm sure many people wouldn't have guessed Sam Howell right off the bat. Howell and Stroud are your top two passers this year, and that a lot of that has to do with coaching, scheme. They're putting these guys in positions to succeed and to at least look good. Noah Brown was awesome, and their defense played pretty well. They sacked the quarterback 4 times. They had 2 interceptions. We saw Kyler Murray come back. I don't know if I take that more of a Arizona win or an Atlanta loss, Eric. Atlanta's just got a lot of bad going on right there, and they've just got a lot of bad energy. They didn't move the ball at all. They didn't even try to throw the ball down the field, but we did see Kyler Murray show some signs of Kyler Murray. He was able to scramble around. He didn't really look rusty. He got the ball out quickly in some spots, and he leaned on McBride. It seems like maybe McBride is the guy that will, have his game raised by Kyler Murray. I think McBride had 131 receiving yards, 8 catches on 9 targets. How do you see this one? Cardinals, Texans. Texans are a 5-point favorite here.
I mean, you mentioned the 500 yards. Teams that had over 500 yards of total offenses, there's 2 of them this week. The following week it rounded up to 46% against the spread, so it's good to fade them. We've kind of
saw this with the Dolphins earlier this year too.
Yep. We kind of saw this, with Lamar last week. Lamar MVP, Lamar's back. Now everyone's talking about CJ Stroud. That was Stroud's first good game outdoors. First good game where he didn't play in Texans. Was that CJ, or is that the issues that the Bengals have defensively? You look at Kyler Murray, you mentioned him. As a dog, he's been a covering machine. He's 65% at 65.6, ATS as a dog, 76.6% ATS as a dog. Do the Texans have the team speed on the outside to contain Murray and keep him in that pocket? We saw the electric play against the Falcons where he basically ran 30 yards to extend the play. I don't think the Texans have the speed, especially on the defensive line with their DEs and their linebackers, to keep up. That's going to allow Kyler to extend the plays. You're looking at it, this Texans defense can be beat in the air. I feel this is going to be a Hollywood Brown type game and also a McBride type game. And the thing to remember with Murray is he is playing for his next contract. Have it be with Arizona or have it be at another team. If he plays well, people seem to forget they drafted Paris Johnson last year. If he plays well and they have a high pick and people want a quarterback, they could keep Kyler, trade back, get some more assets, or they could draft the offensive lineman from Penn State. So there's a lot of stuff going on. Kyler's not going to roll over. And then you kind of look at the offensive production in the whole for the Cardinals. They've struggled when they don't have James Conner. When they have someone that can't run the ball, they've struggled. Now, granted, Conner, he hit 70 yards only, but still.
That was just his first game back, right? He was shaking the rust off.
It just takes a lot of pressure off him. I think this is a sell spot on the Texans. I mean, you
completely agree
here in my eyes.
Yeah,
I'm going to take the +4.
And I think if you just look at the Cardinals this year, their entire sample size was games without James Conner and Kyler Murray. So their team is kind of undervalued right now. And maybe they're not going to be that good. I'm not saying that they're going to be a Super Bowl contending team, right? But I still think they're undervalued based on what their roster has been most of the year and actually what it is this week. Like having those two guys on your team really will open things up. And I do think, I'm not going to pretend like I'm the biggest Kyler Murray fan in the world. It's sort of flipped the other way on Kyler. Like he's had some really good success in the NFL. Like he's been very good, and he's actually been a pretty good winner in a lot of places that he's gone throughout his life. We just remember things started great for him, and then the end of the season, both of the last couple, or I think 3 of the last couple seasons were just awful. He got hurt. Then I think they started 8-0 that year, remember? And then down the stretch, they were bad. It was the same thing the year after that, where they'd get off to these good starts, and then he'd really struggle. But The narrative on Kyler has flipped too much, and I agree with you. He's someone that's super capable, and in a spot like this, I think he can keep them in the game. I'm on the Cardinals spot too. We haven't. I don't even think we've picked out our 5 the last few weeks, but we'll do it this week. This will definitely be one of them. We're both on the Cardinals side here, just selling on the Texans right now. They're just a little high. This feels like it could be a field goal type game where it's like tied and the ball's in Stroud's hands and they go and win it, and we've got a couple free points here. So
yeah, it's all about buying most on high in the NFL, and that's the big thing to remember. Like I felt last week was absolutely hard as hell in the NFL. I feel this week there's a certain angles where we can exploit perception on these teams, and I think this is one of them. I think that this is a little bit too high, and we can look to fade the Texans here.
We're on the Cardinals plus the 5. We move next to the Bears at the Lions. Man, Erik, your Lions continue to look good. It is the third 7-2 start for them in the last 60 years only. Haven't had many of these 7-2 starts, but they look like one of the best teams in football. Even when they got beat up by the Ravens, that was an awesome win for them. They're 15-4 in their last 19 games. The Lions.
Which is absurd. I mean, it's just
that's insane. That is insane for you as a Lions fan. And
I do think their defense has a little bit of issues.
It does. Yeah. And you could see it last week. They struggled. They allowed, 38 points in the game. They didn't have any sacks and they only had one takeaway. That's the key, right? They can give up some points here and there, but if you're going to be the type of defense that is volatile, you've got to be able to put pressure on the quarterback some of the time. You can't be giving up 38 points and not putting any pressure on them. So that is a concern. But what I love about this team, Erik, is they've found a bunch of different ways to win games this year. They've leaned on the run game. They've leaned on the pass. I think Dan Campbell said it. This was a shootout game that they haven't won games like this in the past. These high-scoring games where they go back and forth. They've been in a lot of these games, but they haven't won them. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, 4th straight game with at least 100 yards. He had 156. Lions have 533 total yards, 8.3 yards per play. They had plays of 13 yards, 19 yards, 24 yards, 25 yards, 35 yards, 41 yards, 46 yards, and 75 yards. They were just destroying the Chargers. They did struggle on 3rd down. They were only 4 of 13, but then Campbell picks up a skirt and takes a look what he's got. He goes for it on 4th down 5 times. They made it 4 of those times. They ran. My favorite play, though, was the 3rd and 1 to Brock Wright. The tight end pass right up the middle. That was just a fantastic play call. And they were able to go for it on 3rd and 1 and take a shot because they're going to go for it on 4th and 1 if they don't get it. He feels like, let's take 2 shots right here. Dan Campbell is right now is your coach of the year through 10 weeks. I think no doubt about it, having this team 7-2. We could talk about the Texans. We could talk about the Vikings, them, but Campbell's been awesome. And with 2 minutes to go in the game, it was 4th and 2 from the 26-yard line. They could have kicked a field goal to go up 3. Most coaches would have done that. You go up 3, you try to hope that your defense can hold. Campbell said, nope, I'm going to go for it. They did. They picked it up. And then they run out the clock and they kick a field goal. They don't even give the Chargers another chance. And my favorite play of the game, the pass play was to Brock Wright. My favorite play in general, Jamison Williams. Guy has struggled with some drops. He's been not in the lineup very much. He was hurt last year, and then this year he had the gambling stuff. And then he goes out and makes this fantastic block to spring a big play. Like he flies to get in front of Montgomery and then lay someone out to open it up for him. That's the kind of thing that you have on winning teams, on good teams. But all of that being said, all of my love for the Lions, is this number getting too high now? It's been between like 8 and 9 the last couple of days, Erik.
Oh, I actually got it at 10. I took the Bears plus
right.
The 10.
It's been high.
I mentioned the 500 yards thing, but before Lions had over 500 yards last week, so that's another angle. Another angle is last 5 years, divisional road dogs are 56% ATS. When that line is 7.5 or higher, that jumps up to 60% ATS. And look, Goff has won and I believe covered 12 straight against the NFC North.
That's just crazy.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, it comes to the point where he's just kind of due for a little bit of regression. Fields is explosive. He's going to be playing quarterback, hence the line dropped down to this 8. He's going to look to be able to extend the plays. Lions like to run the ball. Bears are actually really good this year against the run.
Defending the run. They're one of the best. They're one of the best teams in the league defending the run.
They struggle defending the pass, and that's really where Goff is going to be able. The pressure is just going to be at Goff to step up and throw the balls. Big Thanksgiving Day game on deck against the Packers. Obviously, you know, the Packers are down this year, so I wouldn't really say it's a sandwich spot, but I do think this Thanksgiving Day just because the Lions have struggled in it, they are going to be looking forward to it because it's going to be their time to shine on national television. Big win over the Chargers. The trends say to fade the Lions. Lions are going to look to run. Like you mentioned, Bears are pretty stout this year against the run.
You know, just real quick to stop. They're number 1 in rushing EPA against. The Bears are number 1, and they are number 2 in rushing success rate. Or flip that. They're number 2 in rushing EPA against, only behind Tampa. They are number 1 in rushing success rate allowed. They allow rushes to be graded successfully only 32% of the time. So 2 out of 3 times you're getting stuffed when you run the ball against the Bears, which, you know what? You start looking at that and you feel like there might be some things to build on with them. Their defense is actually improving quite a bit. It was last year and early in the year, you could do anything you wanted against the Bears. And now you know that you can't really run on them. And that makes things much, much easier for them. I mean, they're 6th DVOA against the run too. So all of the metrics show that they're a very good run, defending the run team. And yeah, like you said, this is going to be on Goff's shoulders here. At over 7.5, that's where I would jump in.
7.5, yeah. And the one thing we'll do this, and you know, there's just certain wells I'm going to a lot with these player props. Bears defending the pass. You know, Bears have really struggled defending the running back in the passing game. It took a little while to get there last Thursday night with Miles Sanders, but it eventually got there. Obviously, Gibbs is the catching back, so I'm going to look to play Gibbs receiving yard over. My guess it would probably be in the mid-20s, maybe the upper 30s. But I'll definitely still look to invest in that. So it'd be the Gibbs receiving yards over, and the Bears anything 7.5 or higher.
And I will still agree with you, and I'm sure you still feel this way in that you would have preferred, I mean, like Carter, right, or a defensive end or an edge or like a really good defender to help. But
I mean, the more I think about it, I kind of think like Seattle taking the DB from
was what changed.
Kind of like skewed everything, and Holmes kind of panicked.
And so my point was going to be last week was the template for them in getting Gibbs, right? In their head, if things work perfectly, it's what happened last week where you've got 14 carries for Montgomery, right? You've got 14 or 15 touches for Gibbs. What did he have? 14 carries, 3 catches. He gets a 35-yard run and a 24-yard reception. Then you've got Montgomery where he's got the 12. Like the balance like that with those two guys, totally different backs. That was what they were thinking in their head when things go perfectly, right?
Correct. And it's just, I'll always think what could have been with
what could have been. Yeah. You'll at least will see some snapshots with it from certain weeks. But like we said, when you see the defense struggling a little bit, you just, gosh, could they have had another person up there next to Hutchinson?
Play somebody that's electric in the slot, like have it be Zay Flowers, have it be Keenan Allen. That's where the real hole is defensively. And it just kind of stood out. Yeah, it's going to be grimy. I'm going to,
the Bears.
I'm taking the Bears, and
the Bears.
I would just be careful. This is going to be there's a couple big spreads. I think one of those teams is going to lose this week.
Lose straight up, and we'll see one of them right next door in the Cowboys at the Panthers. So, man, Dak has had a couple fantastic games, in particular, like fantasy games. He's had 4 in a row that were just monster games. They had a slow start to their game last week, the Cowboys. They turned the ball over on downs and then had an interception on 2 of their first 4 possessions, but they've outscored the Giants 89-17 this year. And they ended up not only with 500 yards, Eric, they had 640 total yards last week, and they only allowed 172 yards of total offense. Dak finished graded quarterback number 2 on the week. He's actually graded quarterback number 5 on the season. Cooks had a big year. Big week, 9 receptions for 173 yards. They've now won 12 in a row at home, dating back to last year. They haven't really played very many tough opponents, but they've outscored their opponents this year at home 170-50. They have not scored fewer than 30 points at home, and none of their opponents have scored more than 20. I mean, as a gambler or as someone who's watching these football games, you look at a game like this and it's like, nobody wants to play the Panthers. But I think as a gambler, Eric, that's the difference between being a fan and between being a gambler, is that I look at this game immediately, and this was one of the first games on the board I would gravitate towards. And it's not because I'm in love with Carolina at all, but what we're talking about is that Carolina had a bad loss last week. They lose to the Bears on Thursday night, so everybody sees it, and it makes it even worse because Young gets outplayed by Tyson Bagent. He did not look good in that game. And now you've got to play against this Dallas defense. That's incredible. But Dallas is going on the road. I just pointed out how much better they are at home. Dallas had laid an egg in a game just like this earlier this year against Arizona when they come off of a big win and then they get a little too hyped up and they lay an egg. At over 10 on the road against a Carolina team that is so undervalued right now that everybody just thinks, they are. They had 43 yards rushing against the Bears on Thursday a week, but they've got a few extra days now, and they are at their lowest value point. Bryce Young, baby. Let's do this, Eric. I'm all over the Panthers. Talk to us about this game.
So this is why I locked them in at 11. Teams that won, we talk about buying low, selling high. Teams that won by 30 points or more the previous week, that week are 46% ATS. When they are favorites, that drops down to 45. When they're road favorites, that drops down to 39.5. Since 2005, road favorites laying 10 or more are 41.5%. Now, the main thing is I looked at Dak's home and road splits. Completion percentage on the road down 16.7%. Yards, even though he has one more game on the road, he's throwing for less yards. Yards per pass attempt down. TDs down. INTs up. He is really struggling on the road. Panthers defense is playing a lot better. Plus, it's looking like they're going to be getting some of their key guys back from injury, which is going to help. Kind of feel like this is a letdown spot for the Cowboys coming off a big win. Commanders on Thanksgiving Day on deck. Now, this is my worry point. Frank Reich gave up the passing. Frank Reich gave up the play calling.
Dude,
I felt the offense looked a lot better. They're using a lot more motion. I could just kind of it looked better than what it was, because Wright is not a big motion guy. And then it came out today that he was taking play calling over again, and it was going to be a team effort. So I'm a little worried about that because Wright can get a little old school with his play calling. So I'm a little worried about that. But at the end of the day, I just feel this is kind of like the Panthers spot. This would be 100%. So Cowboys to go on the road and lose this game.
I would sprinkle a little bit on the plus 410. I'm not kidding. Not a lot, but this feels just like that spot where, the Panthers win 3 games this year, but whoever they beat, they're going to be dogs in almost every one of those spots.
And the thing is the Panthers have to compete.
They don't play for their pick.
Absolute idiots.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense for them to. They want Young to look better. Now, again, this is not a good defense for him to go against, right? Like the matchup on the field, it leans heavily Cowboys, but we're at such an overvalued point right now. Like this should be more like 7.5. Like this should be above a touchdown, wanting to get you to bait it in there. But it feels like we've got an extra 3.5, even like 4 points for Erik, who got this at 11. So let's go Panthers. Let's go Frank Reich. Let's go Bryce Young. We've got just to give you an idea of how this week's going, Eric, so far, our 3 games that we've got together, and I knew we would when I was handicapping these games: Cardinals, Bears, Panthers. That's a beautiful looking ticket right there so far with 3 of our plays for the week. I know. It doesn't have to be sexy, right? It can be dirty. It can be dirty, like Christina said.
Those are the
because nobody wants them, and that's you always win or lose. You get better value. We've got a point or 2 built in here because nobody wants to play the Panthers right now. Let's go to our next game. Chargers at the Packers. Chargers are a 3-point favorite here on the road, going to Green Bay. How about this stat? Justin Herbert has 59 career starts, including the playoffs. They have scored 1,502 points. They have allowed 1,502 points. Exactly. In his starts. That's insane for there to be the exact same number of points he's scored and the exact same number of points that have been scored against him in 60 starts, including the playoffs. Man, this is another team that you felt like they were getting ready to take the step forward. It felt like defensively they were, because they played better against a couple bad offensive opponents, the Jets most recently. Then they come in this game, they give up 533 total yards, and it was sort of like the Bengals in that it wasn't like, oh, they couldn't stop Amon-Ra St. Brown, which they couldn't, but they gave up 333 yards passing and 200 yards rushing.
Yeah.
They just got beat up all over the place. Then the Lions scored on 6 out of 8 possessions and only punted 1 time in the game. And then there's a situation where the Chargers have a 1st and goal at the 8. They had 8 plays. It took them 8 plays, and then on the 8th play, they finally got in. They had a 4th and 1 twice. They got a penalty, a new set of downs. It was 4th and goal, or it was 1st and goal from the 1, and it took them to 4th down. Herbert had an awesome week. He looked really good. He hadn't looked as good for the few weeks leading in, and honestly, he's only graded quarterback number 13 on the year. There's probably 3 or 4 games where he's been a little head scratching. And Allen was awesome. But in total Chargers fashion, Eric, they've got 5 losses this year. 4 of them have come by 1 score. In fact, 4 of them have been by 3 points or less. They just can't win these close games again. On the Packers side, 3-point home dog here. Love actually played pretty well through a lot of the game last week. And then he throws interceptions on the final 2 drives, both of them inside the Pittsburgh 20-yard line, when just 1 score on either one of them would have won the game for them. He did have 5 big-time throws and just 1 turnover-worthy play. What I liked about that was college Jordan Love, right? The big-time throws, but also making mistakes. He hasn't been that at Green Bay. He hasn't had any big-time throws, really. He's not been a guy that's been connecting very well. So I do like that the last couple weeks, he has looked better. And against this Chargers defense, like at over 3, Eric, I would only be on the Green Bay side here with how bad that Chargers defense is, having to play at Green Bay, a tough place to play. Negatives about Staley out there, not sure how much he's still got this locker room to believe in them after losing all these close games. To me, I'm on Green Bay or I'm staying away.
Yeah, all those rumors that Belichick's going to be the next coach out there and everything. Let me ask you this, and I asked this to Joe Madden, who was on my show last night, and she's this diehard Chargers fan. Is Justin Herbert this generation's Dan Marino?
That's a great comparison. It really is, because it's so spot on in that most of the time when they lose, it's not Herbert's fault. Right? But there is this little bit of like him not when he gets the time, right? When he gets the ball in his hands late in the game, he doesn't go down and drive. Like I think when you and I talked about this like 2 years ago, we had a conversation of if you could have any quarterback with a minute to go in the game, you get the ball and drive down. I think one of the guys that you said was Herbert. And I agreed, like he has everything you want, but in the last couple of years, and when he gets situations like that, He's not been the best pressure player. It's one of those things where it's not his fault, but then when he does have times to be the guy to kind of take the reins and go get the win, he hasn't done it. But his numbers, his stats always look fantastic. And he is, if you're just looking at a guy who can drop back and make more impressive throws than anyone, I think it's him, like more than any player in the league. And that's all of those things are exactly Marino. All of them. They were exactly Marino.
It's just kind of mind-boggling.
Great comparison. Good call, man.
Well, I heard it when I was flicking through the radio, so it's not mine. I can't take credit for it.
But it's good to go with it because, like you said, lots of all the similarities.
I wanted 3.5. If this was 3.5, that would be my buy-in point. My issue is I have no living idea what the hell LaFleur is doing on the offensive end of the ball. Jones isn't touching the ball enough for my liking. You have Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, but yet you're targeting who's at Wicks and Jalen Reeder. Like what exactly are you doing offensively?
Very strange.
So I really have no faith in the Packers here. I'd really say this moving forward, we really need to target running backs against the Packers. But when I'm watching the Chargers game, the main thing that stands out to me,
they can't run the ball at all.
Well, no, is when the ball's inside the 10-yard line, Eckler is like Jim Brown. But anything outside the 10, he's the other 90 yards. He's like a feather. He just drops down immediately. It's like he's just playing for the touchdowns and the fantasy football points. Like it's just really weird.
Remember all the stuff in the offseason with the pay and him too, right? Like he didn't get the big pay. And now you wonder with guys like that don't have those long-term contracts, do they worry more about the bumps and bruises? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like taking those hits up the middle over and over. These running backs got shortchanged a lot. And I think for a lot of these guys in the back of their head, they're probably saying, hey, if you're not going to pay me like a star, maybe I'm not going to play as much like a star. I'm not going to take all the bumps and bruises like a star. We're human, right? As much as we want to believe that stuff doesn't happen, these guys are athletes. They just want to go out there and play. Nuh-uh. Everybody doesn't care about winning all that much. A lot of guys care about their paycheck and doing what they can to get that. Oh, not everybody has that mentality that's just like, I'm going to run through a brick wall to win.
Yeah. Like they don't have that mentality at all. And he's definitely a little soft. Mind-blowing thing to me, Staley's 55% ATS as a road favorite. That kind of stood out to me. Obviously we have the Herbert trend we've talked about before, second half, 18-35. 34% ATS. This game, I really have no idea what to do. Both these teams are a mystery. Chargers, ultra talented, underperform.
And you're kind of hitting it. I don't know what the Packers are. Like, what would you say their identity is? You know what I mean? Like, you don't know.
Well, at the beginning of the year, we thought it was going to be, okay,
lean on your two backs, defense. Yeah, don't try to make a whole lot of mistakes, but you got some young playmakers that'll probably get better as the year goes on. I got no clue what they're even wanting their identity to be.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. Like I would not bet this game at all. It's hard to trust the Chargers to win with this much margin, but on the backside, look, I had the Packers plus 3.5 last week, and it was brutal losing a bet.
Those two drives, man.
Blocked extra point. And then Love he had the ball and I knew somehow he was going to F up.
It's the decision making, right? You just know that one of the 4 or 5 decisions he's going to make is going to be the wrong one and it's probably going to cost him. And that's what's been happening with them. So I think I didn't lock this one in. If it floated up to half, I'd play it. If it ended up going the other way at all, no thanks. Let's go to Raiders at the Dolphins. So the Dolphins are a 13.5 point favorite in this game. They come in off a bye. They entered the game against Kansas City in Germany, averaging 18.9 points per game in the first half, which led the league. They were held to 0 in the first 40 minutes of the game. They did come back and try to make it a game late. They had the ball at the Kansas City 30-yard line with a chance to tie it. Some splits for Miami. In Miami, they averaged 43 points per game. They averaged 39 points per game against teams with losing records, 17 points per game against teams with winning records. Yep. They are 0-3 against teams with winning records. Over the last 2 seasons, they're 0-6 in the last 6 games against teams with winning records or 500 or better. They're 2-7 against playoff teams over the last 2 years. And what's crazy, for the type of prolific offense they have, kind of diving into their offensive numbers, normally the teams that are really good offensively are just overwhelming. They're 17th on third down. They're below average on just picking up the third down, on third down conversions. Their percentage is 39.58. Just to give you a perspective about who the teams around them are, they're worse than Atlanta, Denver, and Carolina at completing third downs. And they're slightly better than the Colts and Tampa. So that's the range that they're in when they need to get a play, like third down and 3, third down and 4, big play. You've got this awesome offense, right? That's your calling card. Why can't you go get a big play when you need it? You know, that's something that kind of jumps out at me. Last few games against good teams, Kansas City, they were 3 of 12 on third down. Against the Eagles, they were 4 of 11 on third down. Against the Bills, they were 3 of 10 on third down. Look, I'm going to ride the Raiders here again, Eric, as this huge dog, just thinking that the Raiders are playing with house money and they've got this energy and excitement right now with the new coach. Like, they're not looking fantastic, but they've really simplified the game. Like what we were just talking about with Green Bay, that's what the Raiders are doing now. He's just like, let's lean on Jacobs and let's not ask a whole lot of O'Connell. Back-to-back weeks, Jacobs has had 25 carries. He had 27 carries for 116 yards. It's the only time this year that he hadn't hit back-to-back carries of 25 yards all year long. And now he's done it in the 2 games here. They get Adams involved, 6 receptions for 86 yards. So they're just leaning on their playmakers. They're trying to simplify things. If they can come into this game, not make a bunch of mistakes like they've done the last few weeks, simplify, lean on like your playmakers, I think they can absolutely get a backdoor garbage time score to cover this game. At like double digits or above, I was on this because I just think Miami is a little bit overvalued always with that offense, and their defense is nothing fantastic. You can beat them. It's kind of a flat spot for them, even coming off a bye against the Raiders team that you're maybe not going to get up for all that much. I locked in the Raiders, Eric, at plus the 13.5.
Yeah, I didn't know what to do here. I just kind of really want no part in this game. I look at it like, I'll give Pierce credit. I guess the story I read today was Pierce kind of brought Jacobs into his offense, and they just kind of went through all the fronts and everything and said, okay, when they're in this front and we're lined up like this, what do you like to do? You know, kind of getting his perspective where he's more comfortable.
Absolutely.
The same thing with Adam. And that just kind of like, when you do that, even if you don't listen to the player, like it kind of like lets the player know you kind
There's
of
a trust
listening and everything like that. Flip side, Raiders just, they just had 2 huge victories at home. You're traveling
and they got
down
up for them. I know.
You're traveling down to Miami. You have Kansas City on deck.
And the Raiders are bad in these spots where they go east, right? Like they've always gotten their
how is that going to look? Flip side, what's Crosby going to look like against this offensive line? Armstead is back, but Jones, Wynn, Hunt all hurt. You know what I mean? Like how is that going to look? Like, is he going to be able to wreak havoc? Because like when you think about it like this, you have a team in the Raiders that has Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, and Crosby. They're always going to be alive in a lot of these games just because you have these 3 guys. Do the Raiders have the speed? Achane is fast as hell. Tyreek is fast as hell. Yeah. Do they have the speed to kind of keep up with this? I'm just gonna sit back. I'm gonna pass on this one.
Stay away for Eric in the Raiders and the Dolphins. Next up, it's the Giants at the Commanders. The Commanders are a 9-point favorite in this game. Last week, Washington got outplayed by Seattle. They couldn't really run the ball, only 68 yards rushing. They only had 14 rushing attempts, but they tied the game late, And Howell has been really solid. Like he finished 29-44 this year, last week for 312 yards, 3 touchdowns, including 2 fourth quarter touchdowns. He has really impressive looking throws every week. For him, it's just limiting the mistakes, limiting the sacks, not running into as many sacks. But he is a competent quarterback. He is leading the league in passing yards. Their defense is just really bad. That is what concerns me about this big of a number, Eric. They're number 30 in defensive DVOA. They're number 31 against the pass. They're better against the run. They're number 10 against the run. But they have been torched a few times this year. They traded away their 2 best defensive players. Brian Robinson Jr. had a really nice game last week. He had 6 catches for 119 yards. He had a long of 51. He also had 8 carries for 38 yards. Man, can we get in on Tommy DeVito here? Is this going to be Matt Barkley? Like, if this was Matt Barkley, dude, I am all in. I'm all in. If I knew this was Barkley and not DeVito, you give me 9, I'm all in. I have not seen this guy do anything, Eric. Anything.
I thought he looked better last week when he started to use his legs.
And that's the key.
Del Rio's defenses have struggled against the mobile quarterback. You know, this is another one of these divisional dogs.
This is way too big of a number, right? This just feels way too huge for Washington.
I actually gave this one out Tuesday night on my show. I locked in the Giants plus 10. Road divisional dogs.
Would you take this low, like what we're looking at now? Yeah, what would be your buy-in point? Yeah, I agree. I agree completely.
Last 5 seasons, divisional road dogs, 56%, ATS, 7 or higher, up to 60%. These teams played in week 7, and the Commanders were a 3-point favorite on the road. Now you're telling me they're laying 6 more points per DRF at 9? There is no world that should be that much. That's just a complete over adjustment. We talk about buying low, selling high. Teams that lost by 30 points or more the previous week and are dogs the following week, which the Giants are, 60.1% ATS since 2005. We mentioned Rivera as a dog before, but as a favorite, got to remember he's a coach we look to fade. 42% ATS is a favorite of 3 or half or more in his coaching career since 2005. As the Commanders coach when he's a favorite, that dips down to 28.6. You mentioned Howell leads the league in passing yards, but he does struggle with pressure. I think that Martindale,
and that's what the Giants can do.
Yep, who's the DC of the Giants, is coaching for his job. With that being said, I think he's going to bring a ton of pressure. I think he's going to look to get after Howell. Giants O-line has been an issue, but without Sweat and Young, are the Commanders going
this
to
isn't
be able
Cowboys,
to create
right?
pressure? Are they going to be able to create pressure? I feel you could run on the Commanders. We saw against the Patriots. Patriots had over 5.5 yards per rush against the Commanders. The Seahawks ran for 4.62 yards. I think the Giants are going to lean on Barkley a lot. Plus, I like to fade teams after their defense was on the field for 70 plays or more. Commanders were on the field for 74. Commanders also have that Thanksgiving Day matchup against the Cowboys next week. I think it's a good situational fade for them. And in my eyes, there is no world that Sam Howell should be laying 9 points, and I don't
ever more than a touchdown. More than a touchdown.
You have to fade him here.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt about it. 100%. It just there's nothing positive coming out about the Giants recently, and they're at the lowest value they possibly could have. Honestly, you know what I think it is too. You were talking about like the Giants and their offensive line. The 2 worst matchups for them in the entire league are the Cowboys and the Eagles, right? They're divisional rivals. I think they're 0-7 against them in the last 2 years. They're not going to beat those teams. They don't have the makeup to beat them. And so coming off of those games, they're always going to feel a little bit undervalued. They're always going to have looked worse after just having gotten their asses kicked by the Cowboys, right? This team was feisty with the Bills a few weeks back. even 2 weeks ago, it was an ugly, ugly game against the Jets, but they're in that game. It's just something about those divisional rivals that are like their big brothers that they just beat the crap out of them, and then coming off those games, they just feel worse. We're both on the Giants side here, plus the 9. Erik got it at plus the 10. I'm fine with plus the 9. We go Steelers at the Browns. So we find out today, as you and I are recording this on Wednesday, that Deshaun Watson is out now for the year with a shoulder injury.
Man, and you just kind of look back, and they're always like what ifs to me. That Raiders team, when
Derek Carr
won Khalil Mack, they had Latavius Murray in his prime. They had Amari Cooper, Michael Crabtree, and then Carr breaks his leg. I really feel like
playing like an MVP that year. He was.
I really feel like that team probably would have won it. And if that team wins it, how is Carr looked at differently? Del Rio probably doesn't get run out of town.
They're well coached, right? That was when he was making all those cool, like, go for it decisions, and they were winning. He was very Dan Campbell like that year, right? He kind of felt that way.
And I kind of just feel that that's the team, with the Browns. When you just kind of, I made this point in my stream a couple weeks ago. There was a point where they were 6-3. I believe that was their record. They're 3 games over 500. They were without Jack Conklin, their best offensive lineman, without Nick Chubb, their best offensive player, with their third string quarterback, PJ Walker, and were second worst turnover differential in the NFL in their 3 games.
And they're still winning games.
It's just absolutely mind-boggling what is going on here. Look, in terms of this game, I hate to tout my own show, but if you watched my show on Tuesday night, I gave out the Steelers plus the 4. I got that when it first opened up. At this point right now, I think the best thing you can do is kind of stay away, because you really don't know emotionally what
you're going to get from Cleveland.
What
it's going to be DTR.
And it's going to be DTR, who looked horrendous last time he was out. Flip side, with the Steelers, there's this website, and I'm spacing on it. It posts the luck metrics, where they post like what team is lucky.
Oh, it's got to be them by far.
It's always the Steelers. Steelers have yet to outgain a team in total yards
in 9 games. In 9 games.
And look, they're winning games. It is absolutely effing mind-boggling how they're able to win these games.
So just to kind of hit on a couple things that you're saying right there, because you're talking about the close games real quick before you move on to Miles. Tomlin, 48, 22, and 2 in 1-score games over the past 7 seasons. That is unbelievable. And then this year, all of their wins have come by 7 points or less. All of their losses have been by at least 10, and 2 of them have been by 20. If they're in the game, they figure things out. They find ways. They've been running the ball a little bit better, too, the last few weeks, right?
Yep. They have been running the ball a lot better. A lot better. Leaning on, Harris and everything. It's Myles Garrett. My point with Garrett is this. Look, you got to take him 200 to 1, 150 to 1 to be MVP. I know there hasn't been an MVP in the league since 1986 from the defensive side of the ball, but you got to do it. And
because the narrative is there now.
If they do make the playoffs, it's because of him.
Absolutely.
My worry with the Browns is the Steelers have 3 capable pass rushers, and the Browns are going to be without Wirfs and Conklin, 2 of their top 3 offensive linemen. Look, I'm at this current number. I don't mean to rattle on and on about this game, but
you got a great number. You got the great.
I would take a future though on Garrett to win MVP, just because there is a path now if somehow they mess around and make the playoffs.
It was their 19th win without scoring 25 points in a game for the Steelers last week. In the last 3 seasons, they've had 19 wins when they haven't even hit 25 points. That is tied for the most in any 3-year span over the last 25 years. So they figure it out. I feel like in this game, it's not only that they figure it out, but like, for example, this game, like they come into this game 3 days ago, they're a 4-point favorite, and we're coming off of Deshaun Watson going 14 for 14 in the second half and looking the best that he's looked in any half of football that he's played for the Browns, and now they don't have to play him. Right? Sometimes you get lucky too. Sometimes you're good. Sometimes you're lucky. Sometimes it's both. But even right here, like even if the Steelers don't cover and lose this game, you absolutely love where you are right now holding a +4 against DTR versus holding the +4 against Watson. You know, so you couldn't ask to be in a better spot.
Cleveland, like we were all over these Cleveland futures, and it's just
it's a bummer.
It's so bitter sweet that this is it. So
Cleveland, Houston, we were all over too. They're a team that's playing really, really well. And we continue along on our NFL Week 11 game previews. Where do we head next? Titans at the Jags. So offense really struggled for Tennessee last week against Tampa, and the Texans against Tampa. The Texans and Stroud had the rookie passing record. This week, the Titans couldn't do anything against Tampa. So that just kind of using that as a gauge, it was a little concerning. They only had 209 total yards, 11 drives, 3.5 yards per play. They only had 14 total first downs in the game. Levis was blitzed on 57% of his dropbacks. He was actually okay under pressure. Like he didn't make a lot of mistakes, but the guy had no shot. He had absolutely no shot with how bad that offensive line played last week against Tampa. And Jacksonville's not been that type of offensive line. Like they've not been, they'll make some plays here and there, but they're not putting as much pressure on and sacking the quarterback nearly as much. Man, that Jacksonville game was so disappointing for Jacksonville fans. That was like just on all facets, you got destroyed. And this was a team that I think looks way better than their record would suggest, Eric, you know, at this point of the year.
Real quick, I want to compare two guys, and I want you to tell me which one you'd rather have. Okay. So quarterback 1, 43 games. Quarterback 2, 41 games. Quarterback 1, 64% completion percentage. Quarterback 2, 66.2 completion percentage. Quarterback 1, 9,874 yards. Quarterback 2, 8,824 yards. They both have 46 TDs. INTs. Quarterback 1, 31. Quarterback 2, 34. And they like their records are basically the same. Which quarterback? I mean, would you agree that these quarterbacks are basically the same?
Almost the same. One of them's got a few less yards, a few more interceptions, but they're almost identical.
Games. Like he's played. Yeah.
He's played a few
games, but he does have 3 more INTs, but they're both
almost identical.
Quarterback 1 is Trevor Lawrence. Guess who quarterback 2 is?
I don't know. You tell me, Eric.
Mac Jones.
Wow. Look at that.
So Mac Jones and Trevor Lawrence are basically the same. And my point of this is perception is key. Right now, everyone's talking how Mac Jones shouldn't have a job, how Mac Jones needs to be benched. What about Trevor Lawrence? He came into this league as the quote unquote golden boy. And I feel he's failed to live up to it. Maybe
he's not, let me say, he's not a bust. He's definitely not a like the guy that everybody thought he was going to be. I don't think he's ever going to be, and I may get proven wrong. I don't think he's ever going to be a top 5 quarterback.
Yeah, but he was coming in. That was
Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck, a guaranteed guy. He's a can't miss prospect. Peyton Manning, you know, that's what he was told. We were told he was going to be, and he's not been.
And
he's not
in this NFL, where in my eyes, it's Jesus Christ, it is completely wide open. And because of him, I don't think you're going to be able to do it. I don't think you're going to be able to get it done. In this game, look, I took the Titans here plus the 7. Another bet. I'm going back to my roots. Vrabel as a dog. Popped at 7. It was at 6.5. I see it's at 7 at DRF. Vrabel's a dog, 58.7%. anything when he's getting 3 or more, he's 65.7% ATS. AFC South as a dog, 62.5% ATS. Flip side, Peterson as a home favorite, 41.7% ATS. We mentioned Lawrence, 41% ATS as a favorite. As a home favorite, he is 14.3%. And then obviously these road divisional dogs that I've mentioned numerous times, I won't repeat the numbers. They fell in that truck. The Jags have issues. They have mad issues on the offensive line. Simmons and company is going to be able to get to Lawrence, and we're starting to see it this year. Etienne's starting to wear out. Etienne's starting to get a little, I don't want to use the term, I'll use the term worn out. He's just taking wears and tears, and his production is going down. And when you have that, you can't, you know what I mean? When you can't run the ball, and they are a good running defense, that's going to make more pressure for Lawrence to throw the ball. I do the DB wide receiver matchups for my little fantasy stuff. Calvin Ridley has an absolute phenomenal matchup. But for whatever reason, Lawrence doesn't.
They can't get him the ball. They can't. And you know what? And I'm going to give. I don't. And I think I've been really disappointed in Lawrence this year in particular. I'm going to put them all together. What I don't like, and I was reading about it too, Press Taylor, offensive coordinator, who's now calling plays. He's not very good at calling plays, honestly. Like the opposite of what we were just talking about with Pierce, a guy who brings Jacobs into his office. Like you look at Press Taylor. He was involved in calling plays in Peterson's final season with the Eagles when they weren't good, when he got fired. And they're averaging this year 1 yard less per rush than they did last year. Their explosive rush rate is cut in half. Last year it was 9.8%. This year it's 5.5%. Just like what you're hitting on, I think they're using Etienne up the middle too much and not in other ways. So they're not getting explosive runs because he's getting worn down. He doesn't have the legs for the explosions, on the like he did before. The third down conversion rate, they're down 7 percentage points from last year. Fourth down conversion rate, they're down 19 percentage points. Red zone efficiency, down. Goal line efficiency, down. They can't get Ridley involved in the game. And it seems like everything they're doing is all quick, short. I was reading an article that said when the Jags started the year that way, it made sense because they came into the season with, Cam Robinson was out. They had a bunch of offensive line concerns and issues. And so it looked like they're doing a lot of short stuff because of those offensive line issues. But they haven't built on that at all this year. They don't go down the field at all. Only 7.4% of their routes go further than 20 yards down the field. That is last by a large amount. They're not taking – you've got a franchise, generational quarterback, and you're not even trying to take shots?
Yeah, it's just
it doesn't – it's a combination of, he's not been good. I'm not acting like he's good. I'm not even trying to defend Trevor Lawrence. I just don't think Press Taylor's good at calling plays either. I think you got a bad offensive coordinator on top of a guy who probably got some bad fundamentals built in from Urban Meyer in some of those first few years, and now it's we keep waiting for him to take the next step, and he's not doing it. I'm on the same side with you here. I'm definitely on the Titans side in a Vrabel spot where I do think Levis has actually been competent, and the last couple of weeks he's been a little bit better than his stats would suggest. I kind of like the way that he's fought. I think he's 8th in the league in hits taken so far this year in 3 games. That's not going to sustain. He can't get hit that much, but he's a tough guy. He's a little better than I thought he would be, Levis. As we move on, Eric, to the Bucs at the 49ers. Tampa had 4 straight losses. They came back and finally got a victory. They actually still have a chance in the division now. Baker struggled early in the game, but he did finish 18 of 29 for 278 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he was able to get Evans involved again, 6 catches for 143 yards and a touchdown. There was one stretch where it was ugly, where Baker missed Evans, and then Evans dropped a pass that should have been a touchdown from Baker, right next to each other. But then following that, they got back on track, and they actually made a couple nice plays and were able to win that game. 49ers have a big bounce back. They dominated the game, 7.3 yards per play. We just talked about the Jags, and the Jags just looked awful. That was one of the most embarrassing games this year, I think, from any team. The 49ers are healthy now. A couple new acquisitions on the defensive side. Chase Young had a couple pressures, and as a team, they had 5 sacks, and they wreaked havoc all over. Purdy played really, really well. Shout out, I've been watching a lot of 101 Dalmatians recently. I never realized Milo's big into that one. He calls it 10 dogs. I'm always like, there's another zero there. It's 100. But the girl dog is named Purdy. Pongo and Purdy. I heard that. I was like, oh, hey, Brock Purdy. So Purdy comes off of a really nice game, and all of his passing touchdowns, all 3 of them were 10+ air yards down the field. The 49ers, man, Shanahan's a good coach, and he scripts things well for them, Eric. They have 6 consecutive games with an opening drive touchdown. That's the longest streak in the NFL. It's nice when you're up 7-0, like right off the bat, knowing you get a touchdown on your opening drive. What do you do in this game here where the 49ers are now an 11.5-point favorite?
Oh, real quick. I forgot to mention something about Tennessee.
Please do.
With the defense that the Jags run, they run a pass funnel type defense. What does that do? They're really stout against the run, and it kind of funnels everything to the middle. That's going to allow Will Levis to get rhythm. And when you have someone like Will Levis get rhythm, it's just going to do nothing but build his confidence. And the one thing that Levis does Stroud doesn't really do it that much. He does it now and then, but he doesn't do it as much as we've seen Levis do it. Young doesn't do it at all. Richardson in his limited time really didn't do it. And it goes back to the 3-point concept in basketball. He takes deep shots. Tom Brady was really good at this back in the day. And it's just something to keep the defense honest. You know
Absolutely.
what I mean? You're able to take those deep shots, and even if you overthrow them by 25 yards, the safeties can't cheat up. And that's
you
really
get a pass interference every now and then too, right? Like
Yeah,
you get good things happen.
So I really think like Levis doing that is going to open some stuff up. I forgot to mention that. I mean, obviously I'm in the tight
I agree with you.
Of the 49ers game. Look, 49ers have the Seahawks on deck. Big Thanksgiving Day game. That game, one team will kind of have the one up in terms of the division race. So is it a look ahead spot? Flip side, this Bucks team for me is one of the hardest teams in the league
to get a feel for. Yeah,
me
too.
You really don't know what they're going to do. They're supposed to have Vitae. They're supposed to be great against the run, but teams have been able to run on them. Their defense looks old as hell.
And then it's just inconsistent too. Like some weeks the offense plays well, and Baker will have some good games with Evans, and then other weeks they can't do anything offensively, and the defense I completely agree with you. This has been one of the most difficult teams for me to get a gauge on all year long.
Flip side, I was all in on Mike Evans, and Mike Evans looks.
Oh yeah, that's all. You hit that one.
Beast. Do the 49ers have the players to defend?
That's where you can beat them because you can attack them in the secondary.
And I'm legitimately pissed at myself because I had the Jags circled last week, and with my note being, if no Trent Williams and no Debo, I am betting the Jags. But I ended up betting the Jags anyway. And I'm kicking myself for doing that just because this 49ers team, with what they want to do offensively, Debo's such a big key to it with the underneath stuff lineup in the backfield. Trent Williams, one of the best offensive linemen in the game. He can set the table. He can protect Purdy. Purdy looked to get over his concussion. Flip side, I really don't trust Baker Mayfield. You know what I mean? It's hard for me to trust.
This is a bad, against a really, really good team with a good defense. Like you can see him making mistakes. It is just so funny though at how bad the level of quarterback play has been this year that a guy like Baker, when we did a exercise last year where we ranked the quarterbacks and we ranked Baker, you and I, and we had him, and I don't think we had him that far off, right? I think it was 4 or 5 spots off. I think I was in the 12, 13, and you were just below the half. And then this year, in that range. And that's sort of the level of quarterback play has been so bad that but he's someone in this spot. This is a tough, I want to play the Bucks with the number, but I've got other games on the board I like more. I'm going to stay away.
So let me ask you this. Who would you rather have as your quarterback? Mayfield or Dobbs?
I take Dobbs right now. And I like Baker. And I'm higher on Baker than a lot of people are. I think Dobbs, and I'm not even saying this with a small Dobbs sample size. I thought Dobbs was pretty feisty throughout a lot of the year. And you and I talked about how there's film on him and he does some of the same things. I think that's been bad habits in being in bad spots. You're the Cardinals starting quarterback where you don't have much and you're trying to make things happen. I feel like the guy's smart enough to go out there. And what we've seen from Dobbs in a few weeks, at least, is, hey, go out there, try not to make many mistakes, and we'll put you in a spot to succeed. And he's done that. He's not making a lot of mistakes. He's not forcing it a lot. I wonder with the Browns, though, right now, you wonder where they are mentally. With Baker, you did everything you did to get Watson in there, and Watson never even really played better than Baker Mayfield did. He had one or two.
That game against the Ravens last week, dude, he
was awesome. He was 14. I think 14 for 14. Honestly, in the second half,
if that's what he was going to get,
Oh yeah, if that would have been the Watson moving forward. But what's funny is that you asked this question because think about it. I would have said before the second half of that game last week, Baker and Dobbs had been better quarterbacks than Watson this year. And those guys were both in Cleveland last year. You could have had both of them there and not have to pay $230 million, not have to deal with the PR and all of the stuff you gave up. And you could have had both of these guys in your quarterback room. But they didn't really know what Dobbs was. And now,
there's a reason Dobbs has been with so many teams.
100%. Yeah.
The story is everyone's trying to make him into this thing, and it's a cool story and everything. The guy's still 2-9 straight up. You know what I mean?
He's not a monster.
And kind of this guy isn't Joe Burrow or Patrick Mahomes. It's a nice tale. It's a nice story. And he's had some phenomenal matchups. In terms of this game, you mentioned the Bucks. I'm hearing rumors that Trask may be coming in because they want to see what they have with Trask. Defensively, my big thing with them is their defense. These DBs have been looking old. I mean, they were getting beat by Dalton Schultz. The DBs of the Bucks.
Noah Brown torched them.
Yeah. If you have the 49ers in Survivor left over, because I feel this is going to be a tough week in Survivor, out of all the double-digit dogs there are this week, as crazy as it sounds, this is the dog that I have the most confident. No, sorry. This is the favorite that I have the most confidence in winning. You know what I mean? In terms of getting, when you look at the double-digit dogs that are double-digit favorites.
And I think even just narrative-y, the fact that San Francisco had those 3 losses in a row, they got healthy, they're coming off the bye. I do feel like they're going to take – I don't think they're going to take this as a light spot with Seattle next week on deck because they had those 3 losses coming in. You know what I mean?
The only thing would be is if they get up a quick 21-7 and it's
then
late
100%.
And then they put people in because they want to
stay healthy.
That would literally be the only thing that could happen. But I don't see this game being good. And Purdy looks a lot better. That concussion was definitely wearing on him that last game. He looks a lot better.
Yep, he needed the time off.
49ers in the
Survivor
if you have them,
Let's go to the Jets at the Bills. Bills are a 7-point favorite in this game. Some of the Bills' numbers and metrics are really funny because, they fire their offensive coordinator, Ken Dorsey. They are 3rd in DVOA offense, 1st in offensive success rate, 3rd in EPA per play, 4th in QBR, 3rd in yards per play, 2nd in 3rd down conversion percentage, and 3rd in red zone efficiency. And you wonder, if the Bills don't commit the penalty on special teams and the guy just misses the field goal, Dorsey's not fired. If they win that game last week, he's not fired. and I'll give Sam from PFF a shout on this because he was pointing it out. He said, in just that sense, think about how crazy that is, that you're firing an offensive coordinator based on the result of what happened on a special teams play. Because he doesn't get fired if you don't lose the game. And now it's more than that, right? Like they have not been the team that we wanted, but all those offensive stats, and even for Josh Allen, he has 11 interceptions, most in the NFL, 13 turnovers, most in the NFL. He actually has the lowest turnover-worthy play rate of his career. So it almost seems like there are some high variance turnovers in a low sample size. I just thought that was crazy. Like, the guy is top 5 with his offense in almost every metric, but they turn the ball over a lot, and it's perception.
There has to be a scapegoat in Buffalo.
Absolutely. Somebody had to be a change made.
And it's not going to be the defense because McDermott's basically running the defense. And you have to think about it. Anytime you lose Milano, Hyde, Elam, they lost another guy whose name I'm spacing.
Who's the cornerback?
Jones.
Yeah.
I mean, anytime you lose 4 guys, 3 guys are all pros, you're going to struggle. And their defense has been what is struggling. They need to blitz more. But for every reason, McDermott refuses to blitz, and that's what is costing them. Now,
because now you got to change to the personnel that you have, right, Eric? Not the personnel that you had before. You can't be stubborn as a head coach with your scheme. You've got to scheme to the guys you have, and we're seeing it in Minnesota, right? They're undermanned on defense. They don't have an incredible defense, but Flores is just putting pressure on a bunch of quarterbacks that aren't that great, right? He's putting a lot of pressure back. He's putting pressure on not great quarterbacks and making them win, and they're not. And the Bills got to make some adjustments. They really do.
And in terms of Dorsey, I always thought they're going to be running the ball more. I mentioned this when we did our previews, how they want Allen to rush less. They have Aaron Cromer there, and everyone's like, who's that? That's their offensive line coach. He was the one that came up with the zone blocking system in Los Angeles, where your Rams had a phenomenal year, and Todd Gurley had those 3 years where he's just insane. They drafted James Cook, and I was like, oh, shit, they're going to do the same thing with James Cook. But for whatever reason, they're not doing that. We saw at the end of the game, they were put in a position, got that touchdown, because why? They just ran the ball with James Cook. I don't understand why they aren't doing that more. They promoted my boy Brady. I like Brady. I'm a big Brady guy. But the thing is, for this to work, McDermott needs to let Brady be Brady. He can't handcuff him. When Brady was at Carolina, Rule handcuffed him. He couldn't do the RPO he wanted. He couldn't take the deep shots. He couldn't use the tight end underneath. If you do the RPO here with Allen and Cook, this may take a little bit of time to get it all going. But if you let Brady run the offense he was running at LSU with the weapons the Bills have, this is going to be a dangerous team. But is McDermott going to let him do that? We see this all the time. The systems that work the best in the NFL, they let their coordinators do it. The offensive, you know what I mean? The coach doesn't have that big a say. He just kind of lets his team do it. And that's what McDermott has to do. On the flip side, this is a quick turnaround. How is this going to look in such a quick turnaround? You have the Jets. Now, for the life of me, I think Breece Hall is an absolute stud. I think he is one of the best young running backs in all of the NFL and one of the best running backs in the NFL, period. Why the living hell aren't you giving him 20 touches a game, especially with Zach Wilson back there? Even if Aaron Rodgers is back there, you should be running the ball with Breece Hall more. I really don't understand that at all. Other side of that, Nate Hackett's calling the plays. Nate Hackett is god-awful.
Dude, Eric, their last 55 possessions for the Jets, 55 possessions, they've scored 2 touchdowns. In 55. And you know those 2 touchdowns? One of them was when the Eagles laid down and let Breece Hall score. Remember? Because at the end of the game, they wanted to they let him get in so they could. And the other one was a 50-yard pass from Breece Hall in week 8 against the Giants. That's the only 2 times they've scored offensive touchdowns the last 55 times they've had the ball.
And the sad thing is, I think Zach Wilson's been playing better.
He
I
has.
really think that he has been playing a lot better. And
I
you
think
look
it
at
shows
this
you
game.
two things. It shows you how bad he was before, right? And how much he's improved just to get to this level. And it shows you how bad the coaching and the scheme is to not put him or any of these players. Like, he's not the worst quarterback that's playing right now. He's not.
No.
There are other teams playing with worse quarterbacks. They have Hall. They had Garrett Wilson. They've got weapons. They are not in the worst situation, but Hackett is bad, and they don't do anything creative whatsoever.
But in terms of this game, I tell our friend Jim this all the time. The sports books are not our friends. I mean, this line just seems fishy as hell to me, man. This line seems ultra fishy to me, and because of that, I want nothing to do with this game.
I'm not touching this game either because the Bills,
way too much.
Since the game against the Dolphins when the Bills beat the crap out of them, that was in week 4. The Bills have lost straight up to the Jags. They barely covered and beat the Giants 14-9 in a game the Giants should have won. They lost straight up to New England. They barely beat Tampa on a Thursday night. They lost straight up to Cincinnati and lost straight up to Denver. They just have not been good. And they're getting more and more banged up. And the Jets beat them in week 1 when Rodgers got hurt. And the Jets played them very well last year. And the Jets have always played Allen very well. I'm staying away from this.
Defense is built to stop Josh Allen and the Bills. But on the flip side, it's just the sports books are not your friends, man. Like, I talk to Jim about this all the time when we do our USFL and CFL show. This line just seems way too good to be true.
Yep. Let's get to the Seahawks and the Rams. Rammies are a 1-point dog at home here. Last we saw the Rams before their bye, Ripien was starting, and you can't use any of the film from that game. Like, he is pretty bad, and they were not able to move the ball at all. They didn't drive inside of Green Bay's 30 one time. Not once. The defense actually tried really hard, and they sacked Love 4 times, a couple turnovers in the game. Now you've got Geno Smith. He actually had a pretty nice game last week. He completed 31 passes, finished quarterback graded number 8 on the week. He led a game-winning drive going 4 of 6, and one of those was a spike. So he was really 4 of 5 for 50 yards with 1 minute left to go in the game. It set up a game-winning field goal. And the offense moved the ball really well. They had 6.6 yards per play. They had 489 total yards. But when the game slows down for them, when they play tougher opponents, or in a spot like this, I don't know. I mean, I like the Rammies here a little bit. Seattle had another slow start to the game. You mentioned for Seattle, their big game is next week, right? After this game with the Rams, they've got the 49ers on deck. And the Rams will have Stafford back. They're coming off a bye. I feel like they're going to have a few things in the offense to get Kupp and Nakua more involved. Kupp has had a bad couple of games. I think he's going to have a monster game here. I do, coming off the bye.
My thing is this, how I look at this game, McVay 9-4.
Order, see the score on top of your screen.
It's like the first time you've done a podcast, though, so no worries, my man. It's all good. I think you're still muted.
So, my fault about that. McVay 9-4 ATS against Carroll. That's the first thing that sticks out. Do you trust Geno Smith? I don't know what the living hell, excuse my language, Seattle was doing, throwing the ball so much with Geno Smith. And the one thing that kind of stood out to me is Smith-Njigba had 4 pass targets the first drive. The rest of the game, none. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're scripting to get him involved. You're forcing the pass, and then he just completely disappears. How healthy is Matt Stafford? What Matt Stafford are we going to see? I don't trust the Seahawks D at all. I think going to be thrown on. Are Cooper and Nakuka going to be able to get it going? Seahawks, obviously, a look ahead spot. Is Walker we've seen Walker's touches kind of decrease a little bit over the last couple of weeks. I don't really understand why is that. I think he's a little bit more explosive than Cabernet. I think Donald's going to be able to get to Geno Smith, maybe throwing him some pressure throws. I also kind of like the Rams here as well. The thing that gets me, though, is I'm kicking myself. This line opened at 3 just because we didn't know what was going on with the Rams at the quarterback position. It's down to 1 right now. I
kind of missed the value on it. If you
like, I'll be honest, like I have not been happy with what I've seen from McVay and the offensive play calling. I just don't.
And I'm going to tell you, he's a good coach, right? He is a good coach. I would definitely. I'm not saying I want him fired or anything like that, but I think as a Rams, but like as a Rams fan, for a few years now, this has been a thing. He's not aggressive. He's very weird with like the run pass stuff. I think he's a creative play designer. He designs good plays. And then during the flow of the game, he does like, he's a good players coach. Guys want to play for him. He's a really likable guy. There are like 3 or 4 things that he does not do well. And I completely agree with you. You watch him on offense. I think you expect him to be like a more fluid offensive play caller, and God, I get frustrated a lot of times with like something is working and then he'll go away from it, and sometimes he'll really try to get too cute with the run and like hammer the run home where it's like, just use the short pass game right now. That's what's working. That's what they did with Brady in New England so many times.
Zach Evans, I don't understand why they're not using Zach Evans more. I think, you bring Henderson off the scrap heap, off the couch to kind of play. I just don't understand his thought process when calling plays. In terms of this game, look, I will maybe look to Cooper in DFS. I think he'll be a little bit underused just because he has disappointed his last couple of games, and the Seattle's pass defense can be exploited. So I would look there. That would be it in this one.
Let's get to the 2 night games for this week, Eric. We've got first Sunday Night Football, the Vikings at the Broncos. How about the Vikings? Josh Dobbs. You hear the nickname for him? What they're calling him?
Rocket scientist?
The Pastronaut. Oh,
right.
You like that one? I did chuckle at that one. I thought that was good. I don't know whoever came up with it, but that's a good one. The Pastronaut is pretty good. And you know what? This is cool for Josh Dobbs. He's having a moment, and a lot of players never have a moment like this where they're like the talk of the town for a few weeks. Everybody's talking positively about him, and I do want to give their coaching staff credit. They've changed, just like we talked about what some teams aren't doing. This offense is running completely different plays than they were running when they had Kirk Cousins, right? They have a few packages and different things that they're setting up for Dobbs because he's more mobile. He can do things more with his legs than Cousins could. They scored 21 points in the second quarter of that game. They took a big lead. It was 27-3. They scored points on 5 of their first 7 possessions, did the Vikings. Then they got a little stagnant when they were up. They had 3 straight 3-and-outs in that game. And Flores, man, he's just done a really good job with this defense. They're ranked number 8 in defensive DVOA. They're 9 against the pass. They're 12 against the run. They bring pressure. They had 12 defenders have at least 1 pressure in this game. They forced 5 3-and-outs. They held the Saints to 280 total yards and just 4 of 14 on third down. And they now have the longest active win streak in the league at 5 games. All 5 of those wins came without their best player, Justin Jefferson, and 3 of them have been without their starting quarterback. And I do think they're becoming a little overvalued now. They went from being undervalued to now overvalued. But when you just look at their schedule, they got the Broncos, the Bears, then a bye. Then they got the Raiders and 2 games left against the Lions. And they're securely in a playoff spot right now. So they have really flipped their season in just the last 4 or 5 weeks on what we were thinking about the Vikings. Now, all of that being said, let's talk about this spot here against the Broncos, because Eric, the Broncos are kind of quietly playing pretty well. The Broncos are, they beat the Chiefs and Bills as 7+ point underdogs in the last 2 games. Russell Wilson has more wins as a touchdown underdog in his last 2 starts than he did in his first 196 starts. He'd only had one game in his whole career where he was a 7-point underdog and won straight up. And that's happened 2 times now in the last 2 weeks for them. And the Broncos defense has been playing a lot better as the season's gone on. Not like that defense that gave up 70 earlier in the year. I can't get a feel for which way to go here in this game, though. Erik, talk to us about if you have an opinion.
For me, it's definitely the Broncos. I'm actually
fading the Dobbs.
I'm actually, honestly, I know it's kind of crazy. I'm actually thinking about
Broncos to make the playoffs, future wagers and stuff like that.
Broncos survivor. Just because I'm at the point right now where I have to get a little weird with it.
Absolutely.
Especially I'm still trucking somehow in Circa, and you have the Thanksgiving day, so I can't use the Lions and I can't use the Cowboys this week. So I have to get a little bit creative with what I want to do. I think it's the perfect point to be selling the Vikings. Look, I know everyone wants to make Dobbs into something, and is it a great story? Yes, but there's a reason this guy, this is his 5th team in a short amount of time in the league. You know, he's only 2-9 straight up as a starter. Broncos have been looking better. After allowing 70 points to the Dolphins, this defense is allowing 21 points per game. Last 3, they're allowing 16 points per game. You got to give credit where credit is due to Sean Payton. He's made Russell Wilson look a lot better. Russell Wilson looks a little different. He looks nowhere near what he was in Seattle, but looks
nowhere near what he was last year.
And the key to this turnaround has been what? You are giving in the 5th round, you should be all 3 excited going to close the season, because he's going to be getting 15 to 20 touches per game. I think you're going to be able to run on this Vikings defense. I expect a heavy Javonte Williams game. You can throw him as well. I think Cortland Sutton, who's also having a good season, is going to be in line for a good one. My only worry is this: Hawkinson is a stud, and Dobbs has a history of targeting tight ends, and the Broncos do struggle defending the tight end. That would be my one worry here. I definitely look at Hawkinson props, and I took it -1.5. I love the Broncos here -1.5. Anything under 3, I just think they're peaking and hitting the market at the right time. And you want to talk schedules? Look at their schedule. They could seriously make a playoff push as well.
Absolutely. Let's get to our final game, Monday Night Football. We've got the game of the week with your Super Bowl rematch, right? Your Eagles and the Chiefs here. So for the Chiefs, defense is carrying them. You know, the Chiefs, it's the 5th game out of 9 where they've scored 21 points or less this year. They're 4th in yards allowed per game, 2nd in passing yards allowed per game, 2nd in points allowed per game. Some of those might be a little off because that was when the Chiefs come off of last week's off their bye. But they held Miami to just 292 total yards in this game, only 62 yards receiving for Hill. Kansas City has a legitimately elite defense. Offensively, though, they not that great. They threw for 185 yards and 2 scores in the first half, but in the second half, only 46 yards. Now, they got up early. Opening drive, 5 different receivers caught a ball. 9 different receivers caught a ball throughout the game. After scoring their second touchdown to be up 14, Dolphins are driving, and they fumble on a short pass to Hill. So instead of the Dolphins driving to cut it to like 14-7 or maybe 14-3, we end up, Erik, getting a situation where the play goes Kansas City's way, and all of a sudden it's like a 14-point swing. Like Kansas City's up 21-0 instead of being, 14-7 in that game. With the Chiefs after Kelsey, still feels like it's a lot of unproven players, like that they got to get involved. I know we've seen Rice a little bit more, and some guys have different spots here and there. For the Eagles, they've not been perfect themselves, but they've looked, they continue to win games. Pass defense is a problem. They allowed 375 yards and 8.5 yards per attempt, but the pass rush had 4 sacks last time we saw them against the Cowboys. They haven't been their best, which you sort of wonder, like, are they going to get better, and do they still have better games to play, or is this who they are, not quite as dominant of a team as they were last year? They're 23-3 in their last 26 games. Like, how do you just knock the fact that they keep winning and winning? They were up 28-7 against the Cowboys, but then they had 3 straight 3-and-outs in the fourth quarter, and they gave the Cowboys an opportunity to steal that game. They only had 292 total yards, and they allowed 406 total yards. Their weaknesses, though. Number 27 defending the pass in DVOA, number 20 in defensive dropbacks EPA defensively. So they do have struggles defending the pass here. You think the Chiefs can exploit that? Talk to us about the really nice Monday Night Football game this week.
So who leads the Chiefs in red zone targets?
I mean, got it, Kelsey, right?
Rashid Rice.
Wow.
All right. Which team gives up the most receiving yards per game, the most receptions per game to the slot wide receiver?
I'd say the Eagles.
Which player from the Chiefs runs most of his routes out of the slot?
I'd say Rice.
Rashid Rice time. Yep, we're going to be looking at Rashid Rice props in this game. You can really attack the Eagles over the middle of the field in the slot. So I really like Rashid Rice. I'm really going to be looking to attack his props. In this game, it's kind of weird. Like, you're going to hear all these Mahomes things. And Mahomes 3-point favorite or less than the 3-point favorite or less. 72.7% ATS. I kind of feel like with the Eagles' physicality, with them running the ball, with how Sirianni is going to look to go for 2, he's going to look to be more aggressive and go for it, that you want to be on the Eagles side just because of the variance that he's going to bring to the table with his play calling. Also, you have Andy Reid, who is absolutely phenomenal coming off of the bye. And then you have the Chiefs, who are 20th DVOA against the run. I think the Eagles are going to be able to run the ball on them. Eagles pass rush, I think, is going to be able to get home. I'm just going to sit out here. I'm going to wait to see if I can get a 3.5, but I'll eventually be on the Eagles.
I agree with you. I'm on the Eagles side here as well, but I'm going to wait. If we can't get it before the game, maybe we wait. And if the Chiefs score first, then we can jump on it and get even a little more value in game. These two teams, I do think that the Eagles are the more, I think, the well-balanced team overall. If I'm going to exploit Kansas City, it might be in a few spots there. Like, this might be a game where you maybe even look to some of Mahomes' props, because his props are a little bit down this year because he hasn't been quite as, we're saying he's not leading the league in passing like normal, and he's not quite as prolific on offense. So I like the Rice props that you pointed out to attack the weakness of the Eagles secondary. And then overall in this game, I would look to lean Eagles if we can get the 3 here. So previews for week 11 in the books. Don't forget, folks, DRF Sportsbook Fast 300 is our promo code there. If you want to go play along and look for a really good fantasy website where you can parlay props, make sure to go to parlayplay.io. We'll give you the details right there. When you use the promo code NFL Betting Blitz, you'll get a match deposit bonus. So make sure you do so using that promo code. Eric, you and I will be back on Friday, 6:00 p.m. Eastern time for DRF Sportsbook, The Winning Ticket. We'll talk some college games for the weekend and then our best bets for NFL. You have your podcast that will be coming out on Friday, right? And then some college football stuff in the morning on Saturday with Jim and Chase? Correct.
Yep. My podcast will come out sometime Friday. Always a little question mark where I get everything done. And 9:30 Eastern time in the morning on Saturday.
Sunday, come hang out with us for NFL Betting Blitz, 11 a.m. Eastern time. We'll get you all set up for Sunday games and for Monday. Thanks so much, buddy. Appreciate your work as always. We'll be following you at ETOF21 on Twitter, at ETOF21 Sports, other places. And good luck with all your plays this week.
Let's make some money, my friend.
Thanks so much for hanging out with us, folks. If you're watching the video on social media, we are finishing up. If you're listening on the podcast, there's a lot more to come. So stay tuned here for plenty more.